She was invited to the most exclusive event of the year, the kind that defined careers, reputations, and futures in a single night. Everyone there wore power like perfume, hiding their intentions behind crystal glasses and polite smiles. What no one knew was that she had been chosen not to shine, but to fall. And the man who could stop it was the one everyone feared, the one who was never supposed to care. Before we begin, if stories like this matter to you, please consider subscribing to the channel. It's free. It helps us a lot. And now, let's begin. The first thing she noticed was the silence. Not the absence of sound, the kind of silence that only exists in rooms filled with powerful people pretending not to listen. The chandeliers above the ballroom glowed softly, reflecting off polished marble floors and champagne flutes held with effortless confidence. The women wore dresses that whispered wealth. The men wore suits that suggested control. Laughter floated through the air, elegant and calculated, never too loud, never too real. And in the middle of it all stood Clara Monroe, holding a small velvet tray with trembling hands. "Don't drop it," Clara whispered to herself, forcing her fingers to steady. "Just don't drop it." She had rehearsed this moment 100 times in her head, except in every version, she wasn't invisible. Tonight was the annual Vallencrest Foundation Gala, a luxury event known for attracting billionaires, politicians, and the kind of executives whose names never appeared in scandals because they owned the papers that would report them. Clara wasn't one of them. She was supposed to be backstage. But Evelyn Hart, head of public relations, and the woman who smiled like kindness while planning ruin, had insisted. "You're perfect for this, Clara," Evelyn had said earlier, her tone sweet and confident. "It's important you're visible tonight." Visible. Clara swallowed at the memory. She adjusted her simple black dress, elegant but modest compared to the others, and stepped carefully between clusters of guests. Every step felt like she was walking across glass. A man in a tuxedo glanced at her tray and frowned. "Careful," he muttered, not even looking at her face. "Yes, sir," Clara replied automatically. She had learned long ago that politeness was her shield. As she passed a mirrored wall, she caught her reflection. Brown hair pinned neatly, eyes alert but tired, posture stiff with effort. She looked like she belonged, until you looked closer. She was staff, and everyone knew it. "Clara!" Her heart jumped. She turned to see Evelyn Hart approaching, flawless in a silver gown, red lipstick sharp as a warning. "Yes, Ms. Hart?" Evelyn smiled, not warmly, but precisely. "You're going to stand near the stage now." Clara blinked. "Near the stage? I thought—" "I know what you thought," Evelyn interrupted softly. "But plans change." Something in Evelyn's eyes made Clara's stomach tighten. "Just smile," Evelyn added. "It's a big night." Clara nodded, even though every instinct told her something was wrong. She moved where she was told, and that's when she felt it. The shift. Conversations softened. Heads turned. Eyes lingered a little too long. Clara stood near the edge of the stage, tray held perfectly still, when the host's voice echoed through the ballroom. "Ladies and gentlemen, if I may have your attention." Applause rippled politely. "Tonight we celebrate generosity, success, and the people who make Vallencrest possible." Clara swallowed. She wasn't supposed to be part of this. The host continued, smiling broadly. "We'd like to recognize an individual whose recent contribution was memorable." A pause. Clara felt the air change around her. "And since she's already standing right here," the host added, chuckling lightly, "why don't we invite her up?" The spotlight snapped on, directly on Clara. Her breath caught. Laughter, quiet, confused, curious, moved through the room. Clara's heart began to pound so hard she was sure others could hear it. She turned instinctively toward Evelyn, eyes wide. Evelyn smiled back and nodded. Clara shook her head slightly. "No," she whispered. "Please." But the host was already gesturing. "Come on, don't be shy." Hands clapped. Someone whistled. Clara felt her legs move before her mind could stop them. She stepped onto the stage. The tray was taken from her hands. The microphone was placed inches from her mouth. She could feel hundreds of eyes on her now, assessing, amused, detached. The host leaned closer. "Why don't you tell everyone about the incident last quarter?" Clara froze. I'm not sure what you mean," she said softly. The host laughed. "Oh, come on, the mistake. The one that cost the foundation quite a bit." A murmur spread. Clara's vision blurred. "That wasn't," she began, her voice trembling. "That wasn't my fault." Somewhere in the crowd, someone laughed. Clara felt heat flood her face. "You were responsible for the data review, weren't you?" the host pressed, smiling. Clara's chest tightened. "Yes," she said quietly, "but the report I submitted was altered after—" The microphone cut out. A deliberate click. The host straightened. "Well," he said smoothly, "mistakes happen, and accountability matters." Clara stood there, exposed, humiliated, unable to defend herself. Her life, her reputation, collapsing under crystal lights. That's when the doors at the back of the ballroom opened. Not dramatically, not loudly, but enough. A man stepped inside, tall, calm, unhurried. Conversations faltered. Someone whispered, "Is that—" Another voice answered, almost reverent, "It's him." Julian Ashford, CEO, investor, strategist, the man known for dismantling companies with a sentence and ending careers without raising his voice. The man who never attended events like this unless something mattered. Julian's dark suit was immaculate, his expression unreadable, and his eyes were fixed on the stage, on Clara. She felt it before she saw him, that strange sensation of being noticed not as an object, but as a person. Julian didn't smile. He didn't hurry. He walked forward slowly, each step measured, as the room parted instinctively around him. On stage, the host hesitated. "Mr. Ashford, welcome. We were just—" Julian raised one hand. The room went silent. He turned his gaze fully to Clara. She stood frozen, cheeks burning, heart breaking. Julian studied her, not her dress, not her position, her face, her eyes, the way she stood like someone bracing for a blow. Then Julian looked back at the host. His voice was calm, low, precise. "Who thought this was appropriate?" The host laughed nervously. "It's just a light moment." Julian's eyes sharpened. "I wasn't asking for humor." A pause. Julian turned slightly, his gaze slicing through the crowd until it landed on Evelyn Hart. "Did you approve this?" Evelyn's smile faltered. "Julian, this is being taken out of context," Julian interrupted, still calm. "Turn the microphone back on." The technician hesitated. Julian didn't raise his voice. "Now." The microphone crackled back to life. Julian stepped closer to Clara, not touching her, but close enough that she could feel his presence like a shield. "What's your name?" Julian asked quietly. "See, Clara," she replied. "Clara," Julian repeated, testing the sound of it. "Did you make the mistake they're accusing you of?" Clara swallowed, tears burning behind her eyes. "No." Julian nodded once. Then he turned back to the room. "Then this ends." A ripple of shock moved through the guests. Julian continued, voice steady. "The report in question was altered after submission. I've reviewed the logs personally." Evelyn stiffened. Julian's gaze never left her. "Public humiliation does not count as accountability. It counts as cruelty." Silence pressed down like weight. Julian turned back to Clara. "You're done here," he said gently. "Come with me." Clara hesitated. The room held its breath. She took one step forward, and her heel caught on the edge of the stage. She stumbled. Julian reached out instantly, steadying her by the waist. For one brief, electric moment, Clara was pressed against him. Her hands gripped his jacket instinctively. Their eyes met. Close. Too close. Something passed between them. Surprise, awareness, something neither expected. Julian's hand lingered a fraction longer than necessary. Then he released her, controlled again. "Careful," he said softly. Clara's breath shook. "Thank you," Julian nodded. "You're welcome." And as they walked off the stage together, the room buzzing behind them, Clara felt something impossible beginning to form. Not safety, not yet, but hope. And Julian Ashford, the man everyone feared, felt something equally dangerous. He cared. Julian didn't rush her out of the ballroom like a man escaping a fire. He moved like a man who owned the building's oxygen. Clara followed at his side, heart hammering so hard she swore it could set off the hotel's smoke alarms. Behind them, the gala's elegant murmur swelled into a confused roar, people pretending not to stare while staring anyway. As they reached the hallway beyond the velvet curtains, Clara finally exhaled. The air there felt cooler, quieter, real. Her knees wobbled the second the spotlight couldn't reach her anymore. Julian noticed instantly. He didn't grab her dramatically. He simply shifted closer and placed a steadying hand near her elbow, barely touching, just enough to anchor her without making a scene. "Breathe," Julian said low. Clara nodded too fast. "I am breathing." Julian's gaze slid to her face. "You're breathing like you're trying to outrun your lungs." Clara let out a shaky laugh that sounded more like a confession than humor. "That's fair." They turned a corner into a quieter corridor lined with framed photographs of old Valencrest galas, smiling donors, glittering dresses, polished history. Clara stared at one as they passed. "Look," she murmured. "Apparently, people have been pretending to be kind here for decades." Julian's mouth twitched, almost a smile. "Valencrest has excellent consistency." Clara blinked. Was that sarcasm? Julian glanced at her. A little. Clara's heartbeat stumbled in a completely different direction. She shouldn't be noticing that. She shouldn't be enjoying it. But she was. They reached a set of private elevators guarded by security. The guards straightened the moment Julian approached. "Mr. Ashford," one said, respectful. "Everything all right?" Julian didn't slow. "No." The guard blinked, then cleared his throat. "Understood. Elevator is ready." Clara felt suddenly aware of her dress, her hair, her status, how much she did not belong beside a man like Julian Ashford in a private elevator. As the doors slid closed, the silence turned intimate in a way that made her nervous. Clara clasped her hands together. "So, where are we going?" Julian looked at the elevator panel and pressed the top floor. "To a quieter place." Clara swallowed. "Is that a normal thing you do? Remove people from public humiliation and escort them to quiet places?" Julian's eyes shifted toward her. "No." Clara's stomach dipped. "Oh," Julian added, a fraction softer. "But it should be." Clara didn't know what to do with that. The elevator glided upward. Clara stared at the numbers climbing, like they were counting down to something she wasn't ready for. Julian's voice broke the silence. "What was the report?" Clara blinked. "What?" "The report they tried to pin on you," Julian said. "What was it about?" Clara hesitated. The subject was a bruise. "A donor database merge. Last quarter." Julian nodded once, as if he already knew. "And your version was clean?" "Yes," Clara said quickly. "I triple-checked. I printed the final summary and submitted it through the Foundation portal. I even emailed Evelyn a confirmation." Julian's gaze sharpened. "And then it was altered." Clara swallowed. "Yes." Julian watched her for a beat, then asked, "Why didn't you report it?" Clara's laugh came out bitter. "To who?" "Evelyn runs PR. She runs the narrative. If I accuse her, I'm a disgruntled staff member. If I stay quiet, I keep my job." Julian's expression didn't change, but the air in the elevator did. It grew colder. Clara rushed to fill the silence. "It's not that I'm weak. I'm just—" Julian's voice cut in, calm. "Practical." Clara blinked. "Yes." Julian nodded. "Practical people survive long enough to matter." Her throat tightened unexpectedly. "Thank you." Julian didn't respond right away. He simply watched the elevator numbers until the doors opened. The top floor was quiet, private. Carpet so soft it swallowed footsteps. A staff member stood at a desk and straightened the moment Julian approached. "Mr. Ashford," she said, surprised. "We weren't expecting you tonight." Julian's tone stayed controlled. "I need the Ashford suite." The staff member blinked. "Of course." Then her gaze flicked to Clara. Quick assessment, polite confusion. Clara felt her cheeks warm. Julian noticed. His voice sharpened a fraction. "And bring tea for her." Clara blinked. "Tea?" The staff member nodded quickly. "Yes, sir." Julian led Clara down the hall to a large double door. He entered a code, then opened it. Inside, the suite felt like a different world. Tall windows overlooked the city skyline, glittering with New Year's fireworks in the distance. The room smelled faintly of cedar and clean linens. A dark sofa, a dining table, a bar cart that looked untouched. Clara stepped in slowly, overwhelmed. Julian closed the door behind them and turned to her. Clara suddenly didn't know what to do with her hands. Julian spoke first. "Sit." Clara blinked. "Sit?" Julian gestured toward the sofa. "Before your legs give up without asking your permission." Clara let out a breathy laugh and sat. The second she sank into the cushion, her body realized it had been holding itself together with pure stubbornness. Her hands began to shake. Julian watched her, expression steady, then walked to the bar cart and poured water into a glass. He brought it to her without a word. Clara took it, fingers trembling. "Thank you." Julian sat in the chair opposite her, close enough to be present, far enough to not crowd her. He studied her face like he was trying to read the parts she wasn't saying. Clara stared into the water, voice quiet. "I don't understand why you did that." Julian's gaze didn't waver. "Why I stopped it?" Clara nodded. "You didn't have to." Julian leaned back slightly. "Someone did." Clara swallowed. "But you." Julian's brow lifted. "Meaning?" Clara gestured vaguely, flustered. "You're Julian Ashford. You don't intervene. People say you don't care about anyone." Julian's mouth twitched. "People say a lot of things." Clara looked up. "So they're wrong?" Julian held her gaze a beat too long. "Sometimes." Clara's stomach did an annoying little flip. She grabbed the glass again just to give her hand something to do. "So," Clara said, trying to sound normal, "what now? Do you call the police? Do you sue the foundation? Do you tweet?" Julian stared at her. Clara cleared her throat. "Sorry, that was a joke." Julian's eyes softened almost imperceptibly. "I don't tweet." Clara blinked, then laughed. "Good. That would be terrifying." Julian's mouth curved faintly. "Noted." The staff member knocked gently and entered with a tray, tea, honey, a small plate of pastries. Clara's stomach betrayed her with a soft sound. The staff member pretended not to hear it. Julian didn't. He glanced at Clara. "Hungry?" Clara's cheeks heated. "My body is apparently very comfortable, embarrassing me." Julian's gaze flicked to the pastries, then back to her. "Eat." Clara hesitated. "I shouldn't." Julian's voice stayed calm. "You can argue later. Eat now." Clara exhaled, took a pastry, and bit into it. It was warm, buttery, comforting. Her eyes stung unexpectedly. Julian noticed immediately. "Clara?" She shook her head quickly. I'm not." Julian's voice lowered. "You don't have to explain tears to me." Clara blinked rapidly, trying to regain control. "I'm sorry." Julian's gaze sharpened slightly. "Stop apologizing for being human." Clara looked at him, really looked at him, and the frightening part was that he meant it. She swallowed. "Okay." Julian nodded once, satisfied. A beat of silence passed, softer now. Then Julian leaned forward slightly. "Tell me about Evelyn Hart." Clara's stomach tightened. "She's charming. Everyone loves her. She tells jokes, she compliments people's outfits, she remembers everyone's names." Julian's expression stayed neutral. "And?" Clara's voice went quiet. "And she's ruthless. Julian's gaze sharpened. How? Clara took another sip of tea to steady herself. She chooses targets, usually people who can't fight back, staff, interns, contractors, anyone without power. Julian's jaw tightened. And you. Clara nodded. She's been pressuring me for months. Julian's eyes narrowed. For what? Clara hesitated. Julian didn't push. He simply waited, calm and relentless. Clara exhaled. I found something. Julian's gaze locked on her. What kind of something? Clara swallowed hard. Donor funds. They weren't going where the paperwork said they were going. The air in the suite changed. Julian's voice remained controlled, but colder. Misallocation? Clara nodded. It looked like administrative fees, but too many, too consistent, like someone was siphoning. Julian's eyes narrowed. And you told Evelyn. Clara's laugh was small and bitter. I made the mistake of asking her for clarification. Julian leaned back, breath slow. And she realized you were a problem. Clara nodded. Julian's gaze moved to the city lights, as if he was lining pieces up in his mind. Valencrest is a foundation with donors who hate scandal. If there's siphoning, the whole institution could collapse, Clara swallowed. And if it collapses, people lose jobs, programs lose funding, the people the foundation claims to help get hurt. Julian looked back at her. That's your moral dilemma. Clara froze. Julian continued quietly. You stayed silent because exposing Evelyn could expose the foundation. Clara's throat tightened. Yes, Julian studied her. But staying silent lets her keep stealing. Clara's eyes burned again. Yes. Julian nodded once, as if confirming the shape of her pain. So they used public humiliation to scare you into disappearing. Clara whispered, Yes. Julian's expression sharpened into something lethal. That was a mistake. Clara stared. Because of you? Julian's gaze held hers. Because of what I hate. Clara's pulse stumbled. What do you hate? Julian's voice was quiet. When people with power entertain themselves by crushing people without it. Clara's breath caught. That's specific. Julian's jaw tightened slightly, like a memory had surfaced. It is. Clara didn't press. She sensed the edge of something personal behind his control. Instead, she tried to lighten the heaviness, because she could feel herself sinking. So, Clara said, attempting humor again, are you going to threaten them with your terrifying, calm voice? Julian blinked once. My voice? Clara nodded, sincere. Yes, it's scary. Julian's mouth twitched. Good. Clara stared. Good? Julian leaned back, calm. Fear can be useful. Clara groaned softly. You're one of those people. Julian's eyes softened slightly. And you're one of the people who calls it out. Clara looked away quickly, cheeks warm. She finished her tea and set the cup down, hands steadier now. Okay, Clara said, voice firmer. What do we do? Julian's eyes sharpened. We gather proof. Clara swallowed. How? Julian stood and walked to a desk in the corner of the suite. He opened a laptop, tapped a few keys, and turned the screen toward her. A spreadsheet loaded, donor flows, foundation payouts, administrative fees. Clara's eyes widened. How do you have that? Julian's voice stayed calm. Valencrest has been courting my investment wing for months. They gave me transparency access to prove they're clean. Clara stared. So they handed you the evidence. Julian nodded once. Yes. Clara's laugh burst out, surprised. That's almost funny. Julian glanced at her. Almost. Clara leaned forward, studying the numbers. Then her expression turned serious again. There, she said, pointing. That pattern. It's the same. Julian's gaze locked. Explain. Clara's voice steadied, professional now. These administrative fees are routed to the same vendor, repeatedly, but the vendor's address? She clicked, drilled down. Her breath caught. It's not a real vendor, Clara whispered. It's a shell. Julian's eyes narrowed. Name. Clara read it. Hartwell Consulting. Julian went still. Clara's stomach dropped. Hart. Well, Julian's voice was ice calm. Evelyn Hart. Clara looked up. She named it after herself. Julian's mouth curved faintly, humorless. Strategic arrogance, Clara whispered. She thought no one would look. Julian's gaze sharpened. And now we are. Clara's pulse pounded. If we expose her, Vilencrest collapses. Julian looked at her, steady. Not if we do it right. Clara swallowed. How do we do it right? Julian's voice lowered. We don't just expose her. We separate her from the foundation. Clara frowned. How? Julian leaned in slightly. We prove the foundation was manipulated by one person's scheme. We protect the programs by showing decisive correction, and we do it fast, before she moves money again. Clara stared. You're going to save the foundation while destroying her. Julian's gaze held hers. Yes. Clara's throat tightened. Why would you do that? Julian's eyes flicked down and back up. Because the people the foundation claims to help shouldn't pay for Evelyn's greed. Clara's chest tightened. For the first time, she saw past the rumors about Julian Ashford. He wasn't cold. He was controlled. And control, she realized, could be a form of care. Clara stood slowly, energy shifting in her body. Okay. Julian's gaze sharpened. Okay, Clara nodded. I'll help you. Julian studied her face for a beat. You're sure? Clara swallowed. No. Julian waited. Clara's voice went quiet, honest. But I can't pretend I didn't see it. I can't go back to being scared of her. Julian's expression softened almost imperceptibly. Good. Clara exhaled. So what's the plan? Julian's phone buzzed on the desk. He glanced at it, jaw tightening. Clara's stomach clenched. What is it? Julian didn't answer immediately. He picked up the phone and answered with a calm that sounded like a threat. Evelyn, Julian said. Clara froze. Evelyn's voice came through the speaker, syrupy and sweet. Julian, I was hoping you'd call. Julian's eyes stayed on Clara. I didn't. Evelyn laughed lightly. You made quite a scene. You embarrassed the foundation. Julian's voice was quiet. The foundation embarrassed itself. Evelyn's tone sharpened a fraction. You took a staff member out of the ballroom like she belonged to you. Clara's breath caught. Julian's gaze stayed steady. Clara doesn't belong to anyone. A pause. Evelyn's voice went lower. You're playing with something you don't understand. Julian's voice stayed calm. I understand perfectly. Evelyn laughed softly. Do you? Because Clara is complicated. Clara's stomach tightened. Evelyn continued, voice smooth. She has a history, a messy one, and the last thing you want is that mess splashing onto you. Julian's eyes narrowed. Are you threatening her? Evelyn sighed theatrically. No, I'm warning you. Clara's hands clenched at her sides. Julian's voice dropped, controlled, and lethal. Be careful, Evelyn. Evelyn chuckled. Or what? You'll glare at me? Julian's gaze didn't move. Or you'll find out what happens when I stop being polite. A pause. Evelyn's voice softened again, charming mask back in place. Julian, this doesn't have to be hostile. We can talk, you and I, like adults. Julian's reply was immediate. No. Clara's breath caught again. Evelyn's smile could be heard in her voice. You're choosing her. Julian's gaze flicked briefly to Clara's face, then back to the phone as if making a decision. Yes, Julian said simply. I am. Clara froze, heart slamming. Evelyn went quiet for a beat. Then she laughed, soft, amused, dangerous. All right, Evelyn said. Enjoy your little rescue fantasy. Then her voice dropped into something colder. But Julian, when you find out why she really came to Vilencrest, you'll regret it. The call ended. Clara stood still, throat tight, chest heavy. Julian lowered the phone slowly, eyes narrowing. Clara whispered, What did she mean? Julian's gaze stayed on her, calm but intense. Evelyn just told me she has leverage. Clara's voice trembled. I didn't do anything wrong. Julian nodded once. I believe you. Clara swallowed hard. But what if the board doesn't? Julian stepped closer, not touching, but near enough that his presence steadied her. Then we make sure they never have to guess, Julian said quietly. We bring the truth first. Clara's breath shook. How? Julian's eyes sharpened. Tomorrow morning, Valencrest offices, you and I. Clara blinked. Together? Julian's voice was calm. Yes. Clara's heart hammered for reasons she didn't want to name. Julian's gaze held hers for a beat too long. Then, because her nervous system didn't know what else to do, Clara blurted, So, do I have to wear heels for the intimidation factor, or can I keep my dignity? Julian paused. Then, so subtle she almost missed it, his mouth curved. You can keep your dignity, Julian said. I'll bring the intimidation. Clara let out a breathy laugh, surprised by how good it felt. Julian watched her like that sound mattered. Then his expression hardened again. Clara? She sobered. Yes? Julian's voice lowered. Whatever Evelyn tries, you don't face it alone. Clara's throat tightened. Why are you doing this? Julian didn't answer immediately. He looked at her, really looked at her. And for the first time, his control slipped just enough to reveal something raw underneath. Because I watched you stand on that stage, Julian said quietly. And you didn't beg, you didn't perform, you didn't break. Clara swallowed. Julian continued, voice even softer. People like Evelyn count on people like you disappearing. Clara's eyes burned. Julian's gaze held hers. I don't like losing good people to bad games. The silence between them stretched, charged, frightening, alive. Clara's voice came out small. Okay. Julian nodded once, satisfied, then glanced toward the window where fireworks still flickered faintly. Get some rest, Julian said. Tomorrow changes everything. Clara swallowed, pulse racing. Tomorrow she'd walk into Valencrest beside the man everyone feared. And if Evelyn Hart had a secret to weaponize, Clara would have to decide how much truth she was willing to reveal to protect the innocent people behind the foundation. Because she wasn't just fighting for herself anymore, she was fighting for everyone Evelyn's greed could destroy. And somewhere in the middle of that fear, Clara realized something even more dangerous. Julian Ashford wasn't just saving her. He was becoming someone she could fall for, and that was the one thing she couldn't afford. Not when Evelyn was watching, not when the next trap was already being set. Clara didn't sleep. She lay in the quiet guest room of the suite Julian had arranged for her, untouched, elegant, impersonal, staring at the ceiling while the city breathed below the windows. Evelyn's words echoed again and again. When you find out why she really came to Valencrest, you'll regret it. Clara pressed her palms against her eyes, forcing the thoughts back. She had come to Valencrest for one reason, a job, stability, a chance to rebuild a life that had already fallen apart once. Nothing more. But the truth, the full truth, was something she hadn't shared with Julian yet, and she didn't know if she ever could. Morning came in pale light and silence. A soft knock sounded at the door. Clara sat up instantly. Yes? It's Julian. Her heart jumped, annoyingly, traitorously. She opened the door to find him standing there in a dark coat, hair still slightly damp from a shower, sleeves rolled up. He looked composed, alert, and tired. Did you sleep? Julian asked. Clara hesitated, then chose honesty. No. Julian nodded once. Good. Neither did I. That shouldn't have felt comforting, but it did. Car's waiting, Julian said. We should go. Valencrest headquarters was quieter in the morning than Clara remembered, too quiet. The building rose like a monument to virtue, glass, stone, banners announcing integrity, transparency, impact. Clara almost laughed at the irony. Julian exited the car first, then turned and offered her his hand. Not dramatic, not commanding, simply there. Clara paused for half a second. Then she took it. His grip was warm, steady, protective without being possessive. As they walked inside together, heads turned. Whispers followed. "Is that—" "That's Julian Ashford." "And who's she?" Clara kept her chin lifted, heart racing. Julian didn't slow. At the reception desk, a young assistant looked up startled. "Mr. Ashford, we weren't informed." Julian's voice was calm. "You are now." The assistant swallowed. "Miss Hart is in a meeting." Julian nodded. "Tell her it's over." The assistant blinked. I'm sorry." Julian leaned slightly closer, his tone polite and terrifying. "Tell her I'm here, with Clara Monroe, and that I brought receipts." The assistant nodded rapidly and disappeared. Clara exhaled slowly. "You really enjoy dramatic entrances." Julian glanced at her. "Only when they're earned." They moved down the corridor toward the executive floor. Clara's palms were sweating. "Julian," she said quietly, "before we go any further, there's something you need to know." Julian stopped walking. He turned to her fully, blocking the hallway with his presence, shielding her from passing eyes. "What is it?" he asked. Clara swallowed. "Evelyn wasn't bluffing last night." Julian's gaze sharpened. "Explain." Clara forced the words out. "I didn't just find irregularities. I was flagged internally years ago." Julian didn't interrupt. Clara continued, voice tight. "Different company, different name. A data breach happened on my team. I wasn't responsible, but I was blamed. Quietly." Julian's jaw tightened. "Were you cleared?" "Yes," Clara said quickly. "Eventually, but the damage was done. My reputation never fully recovered." Julian studied her. "And Evelyn knows this." Clara nodded. "She found it during a background review. She never said anything outright. She just reminded me I was replaceable." Julian's eyes went dark. "So she's using your past to keep you compliant?" Clara's voice cracked. "Yes." Julian was silent for a long moment. Then he said, "Thank you for telling me." Clara blinked. "That's it." Julian's gaze held hers. "You trusted me with something you didn't have to share." Clara whispered, "It could hurt you." Julian's mouth curved faintly. "So could staying ignorant." A beat. Then Julian added quietly, "You didn't do anything wrong, then or now." Something inside Clara finally cracked. She looked away quickly, fighting tears. "You don't know that." Julian stepped closer, lowering his voice. "I know this much. People who survive being blamed for other people's crimes don't come out careless. They come out careful." Clara inhaled shakily. Julian's hand hovered near her arm, hesitant, then rested there lightly, not claiming, grounding. "We go in together," Julian said. "No surprises." Clara nodded. "Okay." They reached the executive conference room. The door was already open. Inside sat Evelyn Hart, composed as ever, flanked by 2 senior board members and a legal advisor. Evelyn smiled when she saw them. Slow, deliberate. "Julian," Evelyn said warmly, "I was hoping we'd have a chance to talk privately." Julian stepped inside, Clara at his side. "You lost that privilege." Evelyn's eyes flicked to Clara, sharp and assessing. "Clara, I see you've upgraded your representation." Clara didn't answer. Julian pulled out a chair for Clara before sitting himself, a small gesture that did not go unnoticed. Evelyn's smile tightened. One of the board members cleared his throat. "Mr. Ashford, this is an internal matter." Julian cut in calmly. "Not anymore." He placed a folder on the table and slid it forward. "Shell companies, falsified vendors, repeated fund diversions," Julian said evenly, "all linked to Hartwell Consulting." Evelyn tilted her head. "You're making serious accusations." Julian nodded. "Yes," Evelyn laughed lightly. "And you're basing this on the analysis of a junior employee with a complicated history?" The room went still. Clara's heart dropped. Julian didn't look at Evelyn. He looked at the board. "You mean the employee who identified the pattern you all missed?" Julian said. "Or the one you tried to publicly destroy instead of silencing quietly?" Evelyn's eyes flashed. "Careful." Julian finally turned to her. "No, you be careful." He opened his laptop and projected documents onto the screen. Logs, transfers, dates, names. Evelyn's smile faded inch by inch. Julian continued, voice steady. "You underestimated her. That was your first mistake." Clara swallowed hard. Julian glanced at her, brief, reassuring, then back to the board. "And you underestimated how much I dislike bullies hiding behind philanthropy," Julian added. "That was your last." The legal advisor leaned forward, face pale. "Ms. Hart, do you have an explanation?" Evelyn's gaze snapped back to Clara, calculating, venomous. "Yes," Evelyn said softly. "I do." Clara's chest tightened. Evelyn leaned back in her chair, crossing her legs. Clara Monroe didn't come to Valen Crest by accident. Julian's jaw tightened. "She was recruited," Evelyn continued, "because she knows exactly how to exploit data systems, because she's done it before." Clara shot to her feet. "That's a lie." Evelyn smiled. "Is it?" Julian stood instantly beside Clara. "Enough," Julian said, voice like ice. "You will not rewrite her story." Evelyn's eyes glittered. "Then tell them why she really lost her last job." Clara's breath hitched. The room waited. Every eye turned to her. Julian's hand pressed lightly against her back. Steady, grounding. Clara swallowed. This was it. The moment Evelyn had been waiting for, and Clara realized, with terrifying clarity, that the only way to protect the foundation, and Julian, was to tell the truth herself, even if it cost her everything. Clara lifted her chin. "I'll tell you," she said quietly. The room froze. Julian turned to her. "Clara!" She met his eyes. "I need to." She turned back to the board, heart pounding. "I was blamed for a breach I didn't commit," Clara said. "I stayed silent because exposing the real culprit would have collapsed the company." Evelyn smirked. "How noble." Clara continued, voice shaking but strong. "The same way exposing you could collapse Valen Crest." Silence fell. Clara looked directly at Evelyn. "The difference is, I chose to protect people. You chose to steal from them." Evelyn's smile vanished. Julian watched Clara like he was seeing her for the first time. And in that moment, Clara felt it clearly. This wasn't just about justice anymore. It was about courage, and love was beginning to grow in the most dangerous place possible, right in the middle of the storm. The silence after Clara's words was heavy enough to suffocate. Evelyn Hart didn't move at first. She didn't need to. She had spent years mastering the art of letting other people break before she did. Then she laughed, not loudly, not hysterically. Just a soft, controlled laugh that echoed far more than it should have in the glass-walled conference room. "How touching," Evelyn said, tilting her head. "A confession, wrapped in morality." Clara's hands trembled at her sides, but she didn't sit down. Julian stayed beside her, unmoving. Evelyn leaned forward slightly, fingers resting on the table. "You want us to believe that you're the hero here, Clara? That you sacrificed your own future out of kindness?" Clara swallowed. "I didn't say I was a hero." Evelyn smiled. "No, you just want to be forgiven." Julian's voice cut through the air, calm and lethal. "She doesn't need forgiveness." Evelyn's eyes flicked to him. "Of course you'd say that." She leaned back again, gaze sliding toward the board. "Ask yourself something. Why does someone like Julian Ashford involve himself so personally in a junior employee's crisis?" A murmur rippled through the room. Clara felt it. The shift. The doubt Evelyn was trying to plant. Evelyn continued, voice smooth. "Is this really about justice or about control?" Julian didn't flinch. "You're projecting," Julian said evenly. Evelyn arched a brow. "Am I?" She turned to the board chair. "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like Mr. Ashford is using this emotional situation to leverage influence over Valen Crest." Julian smiled faintly. "That's interesting," Julian said. "Because from where I'm standing, It looks like you're panicking." Evelyn's smile tightened. Julian gestured toward the screen still glowing with financial records. "Let's return to facts." He tapped the keyboard, bringing up another layer of documentation. "Here's the authorization trail for Hartwell Consulting," Julian said, "and here," he clicked again, "are the internal approvals." The board leaned forward. Julian's gaze sharpened. "Notice anything familiar?" One of the board members frowned. "Those approvals, they're yours, Evelyn." Evelyn shrugged lightly. "Of course, as head of PR, Julian interrupted. "You don't have financial authorization." Silence slammed down. Julian continued, voice precise. "Yet you signed off anyway, repeatedly, using borrowed credentials." The legal advisor inhaled sharply. "That's not possible." Julian looked at him. "It is when you're careful, and when you assume no one will check." Evelyn's eyes darkened. "This is harassment." Julian's gaze didn't waver. "This is documentation." Clara stood there, heart pounding, watching Evelyn's composure finally begin to fracture. Not dramatically, dangerously. Evelyn turned her gaze fully on Clara now. "You think you've won?" Evelyn asked softly. "You think standing next to him makes you untouchable?" Clara's throat tightened. Julian shifted slightly, closer. Clara answered anyway. "No," Evelyn smiled. "Good." She leaned forward, voice dropping. "Because you're not." Julian's eyes narrowed. "Careful." Evelyn ignored him. "You want to talk about protecting people, Clara? Let's talk about the donors you'll destroy when this becomes public." Clara flinched. Evelyn continued, relentless. "The scholarships, the medical grants, the families who depend on Valencrest's image staying clean." Clara's voice trembled. "That's why I stayed silent." Evelyn's smile sharpened. "And that's why you should keep staying silent." Julian stepped in then, not raising his voice, not posturing. "You don't get to weaponize compassion," Julian said. Evelyn laughed softly. "I already did." She turned back to the board. "Suspend me if you like. Investigate. Drag this through courts." She smiled. "But when donors pull out, remember who warned you." The board chair exhaled, rubbing his temples. Julian watched the board's hesitation with something like disappointment. Then he spoke again. "You're assuming this becomes public," Julian said. Evelyn stilled. Julian leaned forward slightly. "It doesn't." The room went quiet. Evelyn frowned. "What are you saying?" Julian's voice remained calm. "I'm saying we isolate you." Evelyn scoffed. "You can't—" Julian cut in, sharp. "We can." He turned to the board. "Quiet resignation, immediate asset freeze, internal restructuring, public statement focused on administrative realignment." The legal advisor's eyes widened. "That could," Julian nodded, "protect the foundation." Clara looked at him, stunned. Julian glanced at her briefly, just enough to let her know he'd heard her moral fear. Evelyn's voice turned cold. "You're going to bury this." Julian met her gaze. "I'm going to contain it." Evelyn's smile returned thin and furious. "And what do I get?" Julian didn't hesitate. "You don't go to prison." The room froze. Evelyn's eyes burned into his. "And if I refuse?" Julian's voice dropped. "Then we stop protecting you." Evelyn studied him for a long beat. Then she laughed. Sharp. Bitter. "You always were ruthless," Evelyn said. Julian's reply was quiet. "Only when necessary." Evelyn rose slowly from her chair. "Fine," she said. "I'll resign." Clara's breath caught. Evelyn gathered her bag, then paused, turning back toward Clara. "This isn't over," Evelyn said softly. "People like you don't get happy endings." Julian stepped forward instantly. "Leave." Evelyn's gaze flicked between them. Then she smiled again. Venom wrapped in silk. "We'll see," she said. She walked out. The door closed behind her. And just like that, the room deflated. One of the board members exhaled deeply. "We need time," Julian nodded. "Take it." He turned toward Clara. She stood frozen, adrenaline still roaring. "Are you okay?" Julian asked quietly. Clara swallowed. I think so. Julian's gaze softened. You were brave. Clara let out a shaky laugh. I felt like I was going to throw up. Julian's mouth twitched. That's usually how courage feels. The board chair cleared his throat. Ms. Monroe, thank you for bringing this forward. Clara nodded, numb. As they exited the room together, Clara's knees finally threatened to give out. Julian noticed immediately. He guided her down the hallway, hand hovering at her back, not touching, but close enough to steady her if she fell. They reached a quiet corner near a window overlooking the city. Clara pressed her palm against the glass, breathing hard. That could have gone very badly, she whispered. Julian nodded. It almost did. Clara turned to him. You didn't have to protect the foundation. Julian's gaze held hers. I protected you. The foundation followed. Her chest tightened. Julian, Clara said softly, you risked a lot. Julian's voice was calm. So did you. They stood there, the world momentarily distant. Then Clara's heel caught on the carpet, again. She stumbled forward with a quiet gasp. Julian caught her instantly, arms steady, pulling her upright. This time he didn't release her right away. Clara found herself pressed against his chest, breath shallow, hands gripping his jacket. Their faces were inches apart, too close. Julian's gaze dropped to her lips. Clara felt it, the pull, undeniable and dangerous. Clara, Julian said quietly. Yes, she whispered. His voice was low, conflicted. This is a mistake. Her heart hammered. I know. Neither of them moved. Then Clara let out a small, breathless laugh. I trip a lot when I'm stressed. Julian's mouth curved faintly. I've noticed. For a brief second, something almost like relief passed between them. Julian slowly stepped back, releasing her. We need distance, Julian said. Clara nodded, though her heart disagreed. Yes. Julian looked at her, eyes serious. Not because I don't want this. Clara's breath caught. But because if Evelyn strikes again, Julian continued, she'll aim here. He gestured between them. Clara swallowed. Then we'll be careful. Julian held her gaze for a long moment. Careful has never been my strength, Julian admitted quietly. Clara smiled faintly. You're doing better than you think. Julian exhaled slowly. Go home, he said. Rest. I'll handle the board. Clara hesitated. And you? Julian's eyes darkened. I'll make sure she can't hurt you. Clara's chest tightened. She nodded and turned to leave, but stopped. Julian? He looked at her. Thank you, Clara said, for seeing me. Julian's voice was quiet, sincere. I never stopped. As Clara walked away, heart racing, Julian watched her go with a realization that unsettled him more than any corporate threat ever had. Evelyn Hart wasn't the most dangerous thing in this story anymore. Love was, and it had already begun. Clara thought the worst part was over. That was her first mistake. The days after Evelyn Hart's resignation passed in a strange, suspended calm. Valencrest released a carefully worded statement about leadership restructuring. Donors were reassured. Programs continued. On the surface, everything looked intact. Too intact. Clara sat at her small apartment table, laptop open, coffee untouched, eyes scanning her inbox for the 5th time in 10 minutes. Nothing. No threats, no calls, no messages, silence. She hated it. Her phone buzzed. Julian. Are you safe? Clara exhaled and typed back, yes, just restless. 3 dots appeared immediately. That's not the same thing. Clara smiled despite herself. No, it's not. A moment later. I'll stop by later. We need to talk. Her heart skipped in a way she absolutely did not approve of. Okay, she replied. She closed the laptop, paced once, then twice. Evelyn was too calculated to disappear quietly. Clara knew that. The knock came just after sunset. She opened the door to find Julian standing there, coat off, sleeves rolled up, eyes sharp but tired. "Hi," Clara said softly. Julian's gaze swept over her apartment. Modest, neat, lived in. He looked back at her. "Hi," he replied. For a second, neither of them moved. Then Julian stepped inside. Clara closed the door, suddenly aware of how quiet the space felt with him in it, like the room itself was paying attention. Julian spoke first. "The board finalized Evelyn's exit today." Clara nodded. "I saw the email." Julian hesitated. "She didn't go quietly." Clara's stomach tightened. "What did she do?" Julian exhaled. "She leaked information." Clara froze. "About what?" Julian met her eyes. "About you." The room tilted. Clara swallowed hard. "What kind of information?" Julian's jaw tightened. "Your past case, selectively framed." Clara's chest tightened painfully. "To who?" Julian's voice was controlled. "A journalist, one with a reputation for breaking scandals." Clara laughed weakly. "Of course." Julian stepped closer. "We're responding." Clara shook her head. "No, don't spin it." Julian frowned. "Clara?" "She wants that," Clara said quickly. "A war of narratives, headlines. Me looking like a liability." Julian studied her. "Then what do you want?" Clara swallowed. "I want the truth, all of it, from me." Julian's eyes narrowed. "That could hurt you." Clara nodded. "I know." Julian was silent for a long moment. Then he said quietly, "I won't stop you." Clara's throat tightened. "You should." Julian's gaze held hers. "I trust you." The words hit harder than any threat. Clara looked away, blinking rapidly. "You shouldn't." Julian stepped closer, voice lower. "Why?" Clara's voice shook. "Because if this goes public, I'll be torn apart, and you'll be standing right next to me." Julian didn't hesitate. "Yes." Clara looked up, startled. "You don't even know what I'm about to say." Julian's voice was calm, certain. "It doesn't matter." Her chest tightened. "Julian," Clara whispered, "this could ruin you." Julian shook his head. "Losing you would be worse." The air between them crackled. Clara laughed softly, incredulous. "You're saying that like it's a simple calculation." Julian's mouth curved faintly. "I'm very good at calculations." Clara's laugh broke into something warmer, sadder. "Then you should know this is a terrible investment." Julian stepped closer. Too close. "Some things," Julian said quietly, "are worth the risk." Clara's breath hitched. For a moment the world narrowed to the space between them. Then her phone buzzed on the table. They both looked. A news alert. Former Valencrest employee linked to prior data breach. Clara's heart dropped. Julian reached for the phone, reading quickly. His jaw tightened. Clara whispered, "She did it." Julian's voice went cold. "She tried." Clara's hands trembled. "What if people believe it?" Julian looked at her steady. "Then we make them listen," Clara swallowed. "How?" Julian's gaze sharpened. "You go public on your terms." Clara's breath shook. "With you?" Julian nodded. "With me." Tears burned behind her eyes. "You're standing in front of a storm for me." Julian's voice softened. "No, I'm standing beside you." The silence stretched. Clara looked at him, at the man who had stepped into a ballroom and stopped her destruction without knowing her name. "I'm scared," she admitted. Julian's eyes softened. "So am I." That confession shattered something fragile between them. Clara took a step closer, then another. Her fingers brushed his sleeve accidentally. Just barely. Neither of them moved away. Julian's breath deepened. "Clara," he said quietly. "Yes?" "This is where it gets complicated." She smiled faintly. "It already is." Julian lifted a hand, hesitated, then let his fingers rest lightly against her cheek. Not claiming. Asking. Clara's breath caught. She nodded almost imperceptibly. Julian leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. Their lips met, gentle at first, uncertain, like a question neither dared to ask out loud. Then the kiss deepened emotion pouring into it. Fear, relief, longing, connection. When they finally pulled back, Clara rested her forehead against his. "That was unwise," she whispered. Julian huffed a quiet laugh. "Extremely." Clara smiled through the fear. "Do you regret it?" Julian's thumb brushed her cheek. "Not for a second." Her phone buzzed again. Another alert. Valencrest Board calls emergency press conference. Clara's heart sank. Julian's expression hardened. "This is it," he said. "Her last move." Clara swallowed. "She's forcing the foundation to choose." Julian nodded. "And she's betting they won't choose you." Clara straightened, fear turning into resolve. "Then I'll make sure they don't have to guess," Clara said. Julian studied her, pride and concern warring in his eyes. "Tomorrow morning," Julian said. "You and me, full truth." Clara nodded. "Together." Julian leaned down, pressing his forehead to hers again. "Whatever happens," he said quietly, "I'm not leaving." Clara's voice shook, but it was strong. "Neither am I." Outside, the city moved on, unaware that by morning everything would change. Evelyn Hart had played her last card, and Clara Monroe was about to flip the table. The press room was already full when Clara arrived. Cameras, microphones, faces hungry for collapse. The Valencrest logo glowed behind the podium like a promise that had been tested too many times. Clara stood just off stage, hands clasped, heart pounding so hard it felt physical. Julian stood beside her, not in front, not behind, beside. "You don't have to do this," Julian said quietly, "one last time." Clara looked at him, really looked at him. "I do," she replied, "because if I don't, she wins." Julian nodded once. "Then I'm here." The moderator stepped to the microphone. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice. Valencrest has called this press conference to address recent allegations." The doors at the side of the room opened. Clara stepped forward. A murmur rippled instantly. "That's her?" "The one from the article." Julian followed, calm, unshaken. The moderator hesitated. "Ms. Monroe?" Clara nodded. "Yes." Julian's voice cut in, steady. "She'll speak first." Silence fell. Clara stepped to the podium. For a split second, the memory of the gala hit her. The lights, the laughter, the humiliation. She inhaled, and then she spoke. "My name is Clara Monroe," she said clearly, "and I was publicly shamed at a luxury event designed to silence me." Cameras clicked. Clara continued, voice steady but human. "I was accused of mistakes I didn't make. I stayed silent for months because I believed exposing the truth would hurt people who didn't deserve it." She paused. "That silence almost destroyed me." The room was utterly still now. Clara lifted a folder and placed it on the podium. "These are the facts," she said. "Documented fund diversions, shell companies, internal approvals traced directly to Evelyn Hart." A wave of murmurs. Julian stepped closer, not touching, but present. Clara went on, courage rising with every word. "I was blamed once before, years ago, for something I didn't do, and I learned what happens when powerful people control the story." She looked directly at the cameras. "This time, I'm telling mine." The moderator swallowed. "Ms. Monroe, are you alleging criminal activity?" Clara nodded. "Yes." Julian stepped forward then. "And I'm confirming it," Julian said calmly. "My firm conducted an independent audit. The evidence has been turned over to authorities." The room erupted. Questions flew. "Mr. Ashford, why involve yourself personally?" Julian didn't look away from Clara when he answered. "Because what happened to her was wrong." A reporter pressed, "Are you in a relationship with Ms. Monroe?" The room held its breath. Clara turned slightly toward Julian, startled. Julian met her eyes. No calculation, no strategy, just truth. "Yes," Julian said, "we are." The reaction was instant. Shock, curiosity, disbelief. Clara's heart hammered. Julian continued, voice unwavering. "And no, that doesn't invalidate the facts. If anything, it made me pay closer attention." Clara felt tears sting her eyes, not from fear this time, from relief. The moderator tried to regain control. Wallencrest has issued a statement. The doors at the back of the room opened again. This time, the air changed. 2 uniformed officers entered. Behind them, Evelyn Hart. No smile, no charm, just fury barely contained. Gasps filled the room. Evelyn's eyes locked onto Clara. "You did this," Evelyn hissed. Clara stepped forward, voice calm. "No, you did." An officer spoke firmly. "Ms. Hart, you are under investigation for fraud and embezzlement. Please come with us." Evelyn laughed, sharp, desperate. "You think this makes you special?" She turned to Julian. "You think she won't destroy you too?" Julian didn't flinch. "I already know who she is." Evelyn's gaze snapped back to Clara, venomous. "People like you don't get happy endings." Clara met her eyes, steady, unafraid. "People like you don't get to decide that anymore." The officers escorted Evelyn out. This time, there was no applause, only a deep collective understanding. Justice had teeth. The press conference ended in chaos, but Clara barely noticed. Her knees finally gave in the moment they were alone backstage. Julian caught her instantly. She laughed breathlessly, overwhelmed. "I didn't faint." Julian smiled, real, open. "You were incredible." Clara looked up at him, eyes shining. "You stayed." Julian brushed a tear from her cheek. "I promised." Days turned into weeks. The truth held. Evelyn was charged. Wallencrest survived, restructured, humbled, cleaner. And Clara? Clara didn't disappear. She was offered positions, interviews, recognition. She turned most of it down. One evening, months later, she stood once again in a grand room. Different event, different purpose. No humiliation, only applause. Julian watched from the side as Clara finished her speech. Confident, radiant, whole. When she stepped down, she found him waiting. "Well," Clara said with a small smile, "I didn't trip." Julian laughed softly. "I was ready if you did." She stepped closer. "You were always ready." Julian took her hands. "Clara, you changed my life." She smiled, eyes warm. "You saw me when I was invisible." Julian leaned in, voice low. "I see you now." They kissed, not hidden, not rushed. Chosen, earned. Love didn't save Clara. Clara saved herself. Love simply walked beside her. Before you go, if this story moved you in any way, please consider subscribing to the channel. It truly helps us keep telling stories like this. And now tell us, from 0 to 10, what rating would you give this story?